Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the Rec Yard every Wednesday night. Tunchi!
What's up? What's up?
It is Wednesday night, and we are on the Rec Yard Women's Prison Podcast. It is 7 o'clock, rec time. Here we are. I'm Marci Marie.
I'm Tunchi.
And we just slide right in. Man, we just live by the seat of our pants around here. So
All the time. I mean, just barely making it in everywhere we go, right at the last minute.
absolutely. I am so happy to have you guys here with us tonight. And Shaquille Oatmeal's coming in with the first comment. We appreciate you, Shaquille, for always being here. And Carrie also, thank you guys. I am streaming to my Instagram page also, and I'm so glad that you all are watching there. I appreciate you guys so much. That was just kind of like a little tease over on the gram to let them know that we existed, right? Ella's tuning in from Australia.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Chloe's here. We're so happy. So we are talking about how to survive a women's prison and women's prison mythbusters tonight. So that's what the topic is. But before we get to that, hey, Tunchi, let's do a weekly recap.
Dang. I was like, what happened? What's wrong? And I forgot we have got our little clip that we
we jazzed it up. So we do want to talk about what's been happening this week, and we had some pretty good events. But can I tell the breaking news about the correctional officer?
Yes, please.
So let's start there. Patrick Stewart Wood was a 31-year-old correctional officer on the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, which is a women's prison. It's kind of a cupcake prison. Tunchi did a lot of her time there. It's not no prison is a cupcake, but compared to some of the harsher prisons, it was a little bit nicer. Anyways, he was arrested, and the article alludes to sexual misconduct with an incarcerated person. I just, right as we were logging on, somebody texted me the actual charges. And I can't check them out right now, but it's 2 charges, and one is violating civil rights of someone in custody, and one, I don't remember the exact name of the charge, but it's something to do with sexual misconduct with someone that's in custody. So what do we find fascinating about this? Because Tunchi and I, we have like 30 plus years of incarcerated lived experience in women's prisons in Texas. And we have seen that kind of thing happen countless times. We have seen male staff members and sometimes female staff members, but male staff members use their authority and break the law, quite frankly, because it's illegal. There's no consensual sex between correctional officers and incarcerated persons in Texas. It's against the law. We've witnessed it lots, and not ever one time during my entire incarceration in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice have I seen them get legally prosecuted. I have seen them fired occasionally. More often than not, what I see happen is they get walked off the unit. The woman who's incarcerated goes to solitary confinement or restrictive housing, whatever nice name you want to put on it, and they're housed there until they can get a unit transfer. And then when they leave, that officer comes right back on the unit. What is your experience with that?
Yeah, Marci, I mean, that's pretty spot on. The few people that do get prosecuted and held accountable for, remember, y'all, this is an abuse of power under the law. That's why it's a charge against civil rights violations, because under the PREA Act, there is no consensual. It is an imbalance of power, right? So I'm sorry, my streaming is saying something weird. So I haven't seen that many. Now I know that on the men's facility I've seen, staff members be held more accountable, but certainly with us it just, they were, like you said, they were walked off or they were shipped to another unit, and the woman is punished. She gets a disciplinary case, which I don't understand how that's happening. And I'd like to follow up with this case to make sure that whoever was on the receiving end of this, how are you going to charge the person, the officer, and give the person incarcerated a disciplinary case? Like, how do you have both? You can't have both. And I think we need to watch that and see how that part played out.
Right. I need to say something first. Someone in the live chat who was watching from Facebook right now left a comment and said, "It's not cupcake camp, ma'am." And so I know, I apologize that I did not want to allude that any Texas prison is cupcake camp. It's just something that I kind of teased Tunchi about because
Yeah.
I did my time at Lane Murray with no AC. And so that's really the main thing. And the other part of that is when I was trying to highlight that comment for Tunchi to see on the big screen, I erased it, but I was not being, I wasn't being salty erasing it. It was an honest mistake. So I really apologize for that. So Elaine is asking me, she says, "Have you seen someone get pregnant? And was the officer prosecuted in that case?" And yes, we have.
Yeah.
I have personally seen women get pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and I have personally seen that officer continue to work on the unit. Not even, I mean, just the same thing. Get transferred, working on another unit, and then when the pregnant um, woman gets shipped off the unit, I have seen them come right back. What about you, Tunch?
Oh yeah. I always talk freely about Belinda's case, and she has given me permission to do that. We've finally gotten her sentencing stuff straightened out with the help of Helen and UT. But, you know, Belinda got pregnant when she was 19 or 20 at Hobby. Marcy, and they didn't know she was pregnant. She was 2 or 3 months. Everybody that knows Belinda knows how gangster is. She was going to have the baby and have the baby smuggled out. And the hang up in that plan was she got a job change for the field. And so she refused to work one day, and they called ICS and all the stuff, and the warden come down there and said, "Belinda, you're going to work?" She says, "No, ma'am, I'm not. I'm pregnant."
Wow.
And they were like, "What?" And she was 3 months pregnant. Took her to SEG, and of course, what happens? Belinda gets punished. Now, she, under fear of retaliation, would not say what happened. She's never told me what happened, and out of fear. So, again, the person in custody gets punished, and that is always brought up during her parole, not her offense, but why won't you tell us who did this? And really trying to paint her as the person that was wrong in the situation. And yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy.
Sue says when she was at Mountain View, a girl got pregnant who had been locked up for over 10 years. When the baby was born, they did DNA and found out who the officer was, and he was fired. And so I'm wondering, he got custody of the baby and raised it. And now that you say that part, that he got custody of the baby, I remember other stories, and I was not on that unit, but I remember hearing that. What about you, Tunch? And then I'm wondering about how they got the DNA, unless he wanted custody
Right.
of the baby. Maybe because the state can't just go in and take DNA of the baby without permission.
Right. So, I mean, I didn't hear of that. If it happened, yeah, again, he would have to be the person that says, "Hey, that child is mine." That I don't. That had to be before Priya, because if he had admitted to it and she's pregnant, they have to file charges, and that's what makes this so interesting that this happened. And me and Marcy and the other women have talked about. Again, I'm not saying everything that happens is directly related to our advocacy work, but I do find it interesting that the units the bulk of us have been on have seen dramatic things happen over the past 8 months, year, for sure. Things that we never saw happen while we were incarcerated, whether it's women on the inside speaking up, whether it's this officer being held accountable, whether it's the AC cooling systems that are put in at some of the housing areas in Lane Murray. These things are unheard of in terms of how much time we've all done. So I feel like it has to be related.
I can't say enough about agreeing with you. I mean, the fact that this officer's arrested, the fact that there's temporary AC units on a women's unit, when all of a sudden this same year, all of these previously incarcerated women are standing together and standing up for the people that are still there. Ella asks a great question, and I almost want to say we should do another podcast on it, because it's not
Sure.
something we don't have time to touch on it today because we have another topic, right? But Ella says, do you think the officers ever genuinely have feelings or as they form relationships with the inmates, or is it more abuse of power? So I think both. And it's a complicated, kind of sticky situation, and I think it's both. But I think that the best thing a male, especially both male and female officers, can do is make the conscious decision that that's off limits. The same way society tells us our cousins are off limits, or
Right.
women under 18 are off limits, they need to have that in their mind, right? So um, I'm thinking, Ella, we need to do another topic on that. Thank you for bringing that up. Justice is here. Amy is here. Thank y'all for joining us. We're so happy to see you guys. I want to also talk about the vigil. We were in
Yeah.
Gatesville, Texas last Saturday, and we were there all day,
All day.
y'all. And we were there, 85 to stay alive. That's why we were there. We were bringing awareness and standing in solidarity with all of the people in TDCJ, the ones that are warehoused there and the ones that are staffed there without climate control. And man, it was intense.
It was, and I love that, as I was doing some panel stuff, and then I went to do some visits at Riverside at the crane unit. Here's this amazing pack of women. Marcy with two of our regional directors, Mandy and Chanel, and so many other people, just went all over town, right? Like you'd said it, like I have this ball of nerves inside that, as women, everything that we ever did, you just felt like you were going to get in trouble for. Anytime you opened your mouth to speak up, you just have this incredible sense of I'm going to get in trouble. And I think we all kind of felt that, right? But as the day went on, and as y'all connected to the community, I mean, how was that, Marcy, talking to folks in Gatesville, this prison town where we, for me, for sure, I grew up, but you also spent 10 years there.
Right. I mean, I went into Gatesville on a white Bluebird brand prison bus in handcuffs and shackles. And it was really an incredible feeling to go in free, first of all. And I was nervous because I just was confident that we were going to run into correction staff. And I have enough trauma behind that. That I was scared. I'll put the word out there. I was fearful to be there. But once that I talked to a few people in the community, and we went to dozens of businesses and talked to literally hundreds of people in Gatesville, and we were well received by every single person we spoke with. It was a beautiful thing. And there were people right there in that town where several Texas prisons are, where thousands of Texans are warehoused with no climate control. And there were people that didn't know that there was no AC in the prisons. Like, it was
Right.
amazing. Like, we were spreading awareness, and I'm like, this is right here in your town. This is happening. Your neighbors are working there. Like, this is the what's going on. So and then I'll just tell a quick story because we're cutting into our showtime, right? But let me tell you, we're walking around the square, And one of our co-lionesses, Mandy, she says, well, are we going in the sheriff's department? And I was like, eek, no, girl, no, we're not. And she said, well, it is part of the community. I mean, that's community. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay. All right, girl, we're going to go in. And so me and her and another lioness, Chanel, Peaches, aka Peaches, we walk in, and Peaches and I had did our time, bulk of our time on the Dr. Lane Murray unit. And when we walked in, there were 3 ladies in their sheriff's department clothes behind the glass, and one of them was a former TDC correctional officer that was on the unit when we were, and she was a good apple. You know, she had compassion. She was there to do her job, basically. She wasn't, you know, someone there to intentionally harm or unintentionally harm, honestly. But anyways, we saw her and she looked and we looked, and she got up and came around outside of that glass that she was in and just hugged on us and told us how proud we were, or how proud she was. And I told her I was proud of her that she didn't work in that harmful environment anymore.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and it was just a great experience. And then we get to the vigil, and it was a good media turnout. Lots of members of the community came, family members that had loved ones incarcerated that were from, not even from Gatesville, but they were in Gatesville for that weekend because they were visiting their loved ones.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, and I just want to name that, you know, this was a collaboration between Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance, the Statewide Leadership Council, and everybody played a huge, they played their part, their specific, unique part, because it takes all of us, you know, April and Jen and Lori and Maggie, just everybody, Justin. And so it just was wonderful to have everybody in one spot just really doing their unique part. We had some people doing documentary stuff. It just was wonderful to be able to have this moment of just quiet and healing. Because sometimes it's a lot, Marci, just protest and being angry all the time. Sometimes it's restorative to just be still. So yeah, it went really well.
Yeah, it really did. And Shaquille Oatmeal's asking, what are the feelings of the Gatesville community to be known as the prison town? And I didn't talk to anyone that we really even addressed that. It was kind of just, that's what it was. I mean, those are the jobs that are in that area. And there are a lot. And one of the things when I was talking to people, I would say, do you have a loved one that works in the prisons? And they're like, oh yeah, my uncle, oh yeah, my cousin, you know. And so I think it's just what it was, right? So there are a few questions in the chat, and we will save some time at the end, because the questions aren't really related to what we're talking about now, surviving prison, but people are asking about what do we know about the hobby unit, and some other things, right? We're looking at some other things. So I promise we'll get to those at the end. I won't forget about y'all. Laquita Davis, I love you. Thank you for joining in here. Thank you for joining. I'm so happy. And we'll get to it. So prison, let's start with the video.
Yes, please. This is so interesting. Go ahead.
Okay, let's do it.
So you want to hear the weirdest fake fact that men in the county jail like to tell each other? That hot dogs, when they are served to women in the women's side of the county jail, are cut in half in order to prevent them from using the hot dogs as a toy.
Okay.
God.
That's my friend Matthew Hahn. He's a prison TikToker. He did his time in California. You guys can look him up on social media. But yeah, he was dead serious. And his comment section on that video confirmed that lots of men believe this to be true. And so we can definitely say that never during my entire incarceration, Did I ever hear a rumor of a woman using a hot dog or wanting to use a hot dog weenie as that? And they didn't serve us them cut up unless it was part of the meal, like they were trying to make a beanie weenies or something.
God, Marcy, and it's just, and God, this is just what we face all the time, as advocates and just people sharing, women sharing their story and their experience. The things that and I, most women can identify with this. I feel like all women can. This idea about our experience through the male gaze. And that male gaze is also the gaze that constructs our policies, the things that we need. It's through that gaze that everything happens. And that's where those stereotypes come from. It's like it goes back to this idea that that our experience is what the old 70s exploitation film said. It's women in chains and women gone wild, and all those films that portray our experience and reduce us to sex, right? All of our experience as women is reduced to being objectified for sex. So I mean, that's where that comes from, and it's absolutely not true.
Well, that is where it's founded from for sure. And I remember there's such a misconception of what goes on in a women's prison. Does sex happens?
Sure.
Sex happens in the free world. Sex happens in the penitentiary, women's penitentiaries and men's penitentiaries. It happens, but it does not happen like you see on TV. It's not some hot, steamy type of, we're hiding, it's a completely different thing, right? But I clearly remember when I was very much married to my little girl's dad, and we're still working on a relationship at this point, and we're on the phone, and I say something and he's trying to talk kind of spicy to me on the phone, but I'm in the day room with 50 women that are hot and sweaty. And there's just absolutely nothing sexy about that scene
Right.
anyway.
Yeah.
And then I say something and he says, whatever he says to me, I don't remember, but I'm like, let me just lay it out for you what I'm looking at right now. Like, let me just drop this like so Valerie, and this isn't like the topic isn't sex in the penitentiary, but
Right.
Valerie says Jolly Rancher toys, myth or fact, and I can say fact. Yes,
Right.
that has happened. I have
Yeah.
seen, I have never seen, heard, or even a rumor about a hot dog weenie. Yes, I have seen women make a toy out of Jolly Rancher candy.
Which is interesting in of itself, and it goes back to this male gaze versus what women really enjoy, sexually or intimate, right? Like it's it's something very specific and unique that has nothing to do with the phallic symbol that men think, right? It's and for totally different reasons. It's not the replacement for male anatomy. It's for something very specific with women, right? So yeah, you're right, Marcy. And it's not that sex doesn't happen; it happens. But why is that? The number one myth and the number one thing for both men and women that when you start talking about, like, look, I'm going to prison, I've been convicted, what can I expect? And I think the expectations is which should be an expectation to be sexually assaulted. That's a problem with our culture if we believe that expectation is just a natural expectation for incarceration. That's wrong. But for women, it's this expectation that, again, that 70s exploitation film where you're going to just be buck wild with all this hot, steamy sex. No, the staff are super hyper focused as well on our sexuality. And that is not the bulk of our experience with incarceration.
Absolutely. I will, and we'll move on from the sex after this because I want to get to how to survive. I want to get to the meat, right? Because maybe we can help somebody with that. But on Instagram, they're watching us also, and Iris says that she was a nurse in a prison facility, and she always had missing gloves, and so yes, gloves are also utilized for a couple of things in the penitentiary. They're utilized to hold contraband, because if you had to put something inside of you to hide it from the officers, you used a glove often. And if you sold or bought maybe bleach, because they didn't give us proper cleaning supplies. If you wanted to sterilize your environment, your cubicle, your cell, you had to do that illegally. And you would buy bleach, powdered bleach, and they would put them in the fingers and sell it a finger. Like
Yeah,
somebody
right.
would say, "Hey, I have 2 fingers." Well, that
Right.
meant I have 2 fingers of bleach.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want them? Yeah, I want them. And
Yeah,
that's how
right.
that would work. So, and then also, if you were to make a toy, you could utilize a glove that way also. So, yes, that all of that happened. Now, with all of that said, the absolute first piece of advice I give someone going into the penitentiary, or looking at time in any way, is not to get involved in a relationship.
Right.
So, 100, not 100%, that's a
Mhm.
little off, but the majority of any violence I witnessed while I was in the penitentiary had to do with relationships, either your own relationship, or you got involved in someone else's in some way, you commented on someone else's, you yeah, you were used to make someone's partner jealous unbeknownst to yourself.
Right.
All of those things happen.
Well, I'm going to agree with you. Number one advice, which is kind of a double-sided sword, right? Because I tell people even on the inside now, like, girl, stay away from that girl. Stop. Go to college, do your time, like what we would call old lady time. Like, just read your books, just do you, man. If you need to talk to somebody, have one or two friends that you're not attracted to, and do your time, because you're going to avoid all of that you just said, like the violence, the drama, the emotional violence, the petty stuff, all of that. You just almost avoid all of it, right? um but at the same time, how did I get through my time? I had relationships, and that helped me through a lot. But it's the person I had the relationship with, which is tricky, right? Like, because people present themselves any kind of way. Another thing that we learn in prison is that, what did we say? You can be anybody in the penitentiary. You could be the mayor's son. You could be rich. You could have been a doctor. You could all this stuff. People have no way. Now, I think it's a little bit different because people have more technology and more access for people to look and check up on stuff. But you don't know who you're getting involved with and where they are emotionally. So it is a double-edged sword. It helped me with my time, but it also almost cost me um, several times as well.
Right. And that it's I obviously did my time with relationships also. Um I was involved in a lot of the dramatics. It took part. I ended up in medium custody. It played a toll on my mental health, but also my mental health played a toll on my relationship.
Right,
It
right.
was like I was not a stable person at that time. It Yeah, so um but but even with all of that, and even with the fact that I am currently in a very committed relationship. In fact, we're getting married on November 4th with my girlfriend whom I met in prison. And
Right,
we had a very much
right.
prison relationship. Even with that, both her and I both would say, and it's not just because of us, right? It's not just because of the dramatics from the incarcerated folks. It's the hyper focus
Mm-hmm.
from the staff.
Right.
All of a sudden, when you're in a relationship in the penitentiary, the staff is just boom,
Yeah.
super focused on you, whether you're having any sex or not. I mean, my girlfriend and I didn't even live in the same dorm. Like that wasn't a bunch of that happening for us. It was just us writing some notes back and forth, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. And we still got in trouble for, I used to say to everybody around me, y'all can be doing all this stuff, but if I forget to tuck in the back of my shirt, I'm getting a full-blown disciplinary case because they're watching me that hard because they knew I was, yeah. So, um,
For sure. It puts a target on you. And it's just to just avoid it, right? Like, and understanding, I think the next thing that you have to know going in is, you already said it, which is pretty close to it. You need to mind your own business, right? Like, I don't believe in the whole never do anything if something's happening, right? Like, that you have to find ways to intervene. Because, Marcy, the first time when I did 10 years and I got out and I lived with that, you don't snitch, you don't do anything, you mind your own business, and that's that. I remember a guy was beating his wife next door. And my girlfriend at the time, we were living together, she was a social worker, and the lady's beating on our door, and she's about to run down our steps to go open the door, and I grabbed her arm and I said, "Don't you dare open that door." I said, "You stay out of that." And she didn't know me in my prison time, but she knew enough of what prison had done to me because it was made manifest in that moment. She said, "Prison changed you. I don't know who you are right now." And so that always stuck with me, like, oh, like, I know that we kind of created this no snitching thing to keep us safe, right? Like, because you get in somebody's business, you're going to have, the repercussions are different for men. I think it's very physically dangerous. For women, it's all kinds of dangerous in another way that feels almost like death, especially when it comes to them trying to cross you out with your family, your kids, your parole, and just God almighty, right? But finding ways to respond to things so covertly that people don't know that you're in their business, right? Like, if somebody's beating their girlfriend, I have to find some way to to intervene, because my development and my humanity in numbing that was so detrimental to my success on the outside, right? So you can't just mind your own business completely and ignore all of that, because it damages you as a person. But it is tricky and it's dangerous.
it absolutely is, because if that was that same scenario was happening, and in the cubicle next to you there was a relationship, a domestic violence act occurring, and you went and told, it would be unsafe for you. It would be, I mean, it could be physically unsafe from, and then inevitably they get back together.
Right.
You know, um, yeah, it's sad, and that is something that happens in a lot of aspects, right? Emotionally, emotionally and mentally, prison is such a damaging and harmful environment that carries over to the free world, um, very much so. Kristen's talking about people being different on the inside and then coming home and being different. And I think that's true in a lot of cases, because for me, I was definitely a different person in there. I completely adapted to my environment in there. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that statement completely. Um, I saw women that I did, my treatment with at Henley, just come out and be somebody totally different. And it hurt. And I was so sad, because that's not the person I know when she's not in her addiction. You know what I mean? But at the same time, women I saw that were Girl, I mean, vicious mofos, vicious. They were in survival mode. And then I come home completely different, right? Because they're not in survival mode all the time. Like Marcy said it, like you almost, you have to become somebody different to survive while still hanging on to something that keeps your humanity in place. Because I think that's where it really, really deeply affected me when I got out after 10 years from being there from a kid, growing up in there. I was completely apathetic and numb and empty. You know what I mean? Because I had turned that off. Because, first of all, it's overwhelming, the stuff that you see and experience. And plus, you're taught, stay out of my business or I'm going to beat your ass. And I don't want that to happen. So I just become numb. And the second time I got locked up as an adult, I was like, I can't live like this. I can't transition into the community. And I've still had a lot of work to do because my old prison ways have amplified my personality disorders. You know what I mean? The mental health stuff I've struggled, it only strengthened, Marcy, those coping skills. And you know what I mean? Like, it really did, because you develop those mental health disorders to cope with childhood trauma, and girl, you really amplify them when you have to deal with the traumas of incarceration. And it's take a lot of work to untangle that. And as we always say, incarceration is just, it's just harmful all the way through and through. Mandy's right, prison mode, like boom, I'm there. And I see that sometimes with all of us when we get triggered or we're in a situation. It's like, girl, we finna go back to Lane Murray right here and right now. And that's hard not to flip all the time to that.
It absolutely is, but it's a coping skill, just like you said. And so how do you advise someone that's possibly facing that situation, or how do you advise someone to tell their loved one who's currently incarcerated, because that's who we've got here joining us? How do we tell them to navigate those waters?
Well, I mean, I think, encouraging people to have a real spiritual foundation. And I'm not talking about the kind of
Say it.
the
Prison
Jesus
religion.
conversion, prison religion. I've come to Jesus now that I'm in jail and prison. And that is a way to distract, the same way having relationships, the same way doing all kinds of stuff keeps your mind off of the time. I'm saying find a real spiritual practice, trying to address your mental health stuff, and just really, especially for loved ones, allowing the person on the inside to walk this delicate balance. And I think you'll agree, of having one foot in the prison and one foot out. And I told my girlfriend at the time when I was going in, I said, I need your help. I said, please. And this is the most painful way to do time, is to have one foot in the prison and one foot out. Because if I put both feet in here, I'm done. This is gone. If I put both feet out here, I won't make it in here. Like, it is a delicate balance. And I think it's just learning how to communicate and provide space for outlets for that, to be able to talk about what's really happening. I remember telling my dad at visitation, because, certainly there was a lot of stuff we didn't tell our loved ones because we didn't want to worry them, Marcy. But the first time I never told them anything. The second time I was like, Daddy, I want to beat this lady's ass. I do. I don't like the way this is happening. And, she had tried to bully me, and, I'm wanting to respond for the ways that got me into prison and the way that prison is cultivated. Believe it or not, Marcy, I wanted to beat this girl pretty bad. And my dad said, he talked to me through, at our visit, and he walked me through it. And he said, honey, you're free to do anything, but I think we've had some trouble in the past looking at consequences. If you're willing to accept the consequences, then do it. So what are the consequences? And having that difficult conversation with my family, I didn't, right? Like, I was able to hold on to that thing that we all have, right? Is like our humanity, because once that shrivels up, you're done.
I agree. And I agree with that about keeping how difficult it is balancing, because the inside of the penitentiary is a whole nother world. It has a whole different set of rules. It has a whole different, um, I mean, just the whole thing. It's like you're on a different planet. And if you're there trying to still keep and direct things in the free world, that can be really tricky and very tiring and emotionally completely drain you. And that's something, even as a mother, going in as a mother and a daughter and a sister, as I did, um, keeping that balance, it was hard. And leaving visitation and stepping back into that reality, it was really, really tricky. It was really tricky. So that's what I would say. Couple things for as just coming from mom's perspective, right? So I went in with 2 in diapers and 3 in middle school. My first mistake, besides getting arrested and going to prison, right? But my first mistake or thing that I wish I could change, was I wish I had been more upfront with my middle school age children about what was happening and what parole was, and actually how much time I did. My kids didn't even know that I had a 20-year sentence until I got home, and they were adults. They just didn't know. I assumed that their family on the outside was talking to them. So I regret that. The second thing I regret, and especially regarding my youngest daughters, is I talked to them all the time. They came to visit all the time. We definitely had a relationship, but I didn't parent them at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was really like maybe I was the aunt kind of
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And so I wish that I had navigated that. But as far as keep communication with your kids, that's it. Even if they're not writing back, even if you're not 100% sure if they're getting the letters,
Mm-hmm.
you keep writing. You do your part, no matter what the response is from them.
I love that, Marcy. I love that, because I think the tendency is, oh, well, I'm just not going to write anymore. You never respond, so I'm just not going to write. And I didn't have kids, right? But my brother and my pen pal. Oh, I wish we could just have a whole episode about her. But my girlfriend that I lived with for a long time, that she was my support system, and my parents, I wrote them every Sunday. My brother and my sister-in-law, I wrote them every Sunday. And guess what? I talked to my parents once a week on the phone, but everybody else I may have heard from once every 2 or 3 months. I wrote them literally every Sunday, because it's just what you said. And it's what I would tell people too, when they talk about their kids, like, I don't ever hear from my family. I said, honey, you just consistently write them, right? Because it's kind of your responsibility as the parent to continue to do your part. And I would tell the people, my brother and them, when I would write, I would be like, well, I'm just sitting here having my coffee and I'm just talking. And I know that you don't have a lot of time to answer the 5 pages that I just wrote. But I really need this. I really need to connect to you every Sunday morning with my cup of coffee, to ground me. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's do your part no matter what.
For yourself, as also, just like you said, that grounded you. It's for yourself and for them. So definitely do your part. How about navigating? How do incarcerated people, how would you advise women looking at time, to navigate the staff?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I I always, this is my personal preference, because it got to me, right? Because I've suffered so much from staff members in the youth system mainly, but also in the adult system. They are not my friends. They are not my buddies. I think there's a way to connect to them that you can respect each other as humans. And I think that takes a little bit of work. Um, But the buddy, you're my friend, and I'm going to sit on my cubicle, and they're going to lean over my wall, and they're going to tell me all about their family and all this stuff. Inappropriate. And I don't think, I know the rest of us would look at that as like, girl, get that officer out of here. He is not your friend. She is not your friend. They are here for a job. And it goes better when we kind of, it reminded me of like, two big cats in a cage, just kind of watching each other and just kind of, but at the end of the day, they have the power and they have the control. And so, Marci, we all know that I only had 2 minor cases in 20 years, right? And that's because I lived a certain way, probably painfully. But my interactions with staff was always, I tell them whatever they're asking for, I do whatever they need me to do, and that is it. And that would minimize all that I didn't ask why, which is hard as women. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to argue, because at the end of the day, they have the power to take my stuff or take my ID, or they don't have to explain anything to me. So I'm not even going to put myself in that position. I lived the way I did so that I could minimize their interaction with me, because the second they interact with me in a way that is abusive and harmful, I'm going to lose my shit. So I minimized it as much as I could.
Kelly says you just have to wing it with the staff, but most are not your pals. And I want to say that you definitely have to just kind of realize you don't have any power in there. Save it. You're the what little power you have. Hey, write to Linus, write to Linus and tell us what's going on, and vent to us. And if it's something that policy wise that's being broken and we need to get on it, maybe we can help. That's that kind of situation. But you have to realize that your voice in there means nothing. Your word means nothing to those people. Your voice is important, but to those people, and by those people, I mean the prison system, right, it means nothing. And so you just have to decide that that's it, right? You have to decide, I'm not going to speak on every time I see some injustice that's going on in there, because then again, you're drawing attention to yourself. You're making yourself a target. And that's how I did my time. I was a disruptor. I called him out on too many things, and it definitely got me caught up. So, yeah. Valerie says, stay out of the way. You don't interact unless you have to. But, and that's kind of right either. Also, that's kind of a safe way too. And you are going to have officers that just talk to you like, I don't know, you're a person. You are going to have that. And you're going to have some that you probably could trust. And you're going to have some that if you met under different circumstances, you might be friends with.
Right.
But you're also going to have ones that you think are cool and you think you're cool with. And then when stuff goes down, they're going to ride with their coworker, right, and leave you in the dust. So you have to remember that.
Well, and I think that was what was always, because through my journey, right, starting as a kid, it felt like the ones that, and I learned this pretty quickly. Okay, well, they seem real nice, and they see me as a person, or they're here for me, or I'm interacting. And then it reminds me of a Doberman that has not been trained right. Like Dobermans, and they're kind of notorious for seeming okay and then suddenly flipping on you, right? That's what staff reminded me of, was wild Dobermans, that they would seem safe, and it was almost like a trap, because all of a sudden they just flip on you. I'm gonna write you up. And then it was like, okay, but you were just so nice to me a while ago. Like, so I never felt like I could trust that wasn't going to happen. So to head that off, I'm just not. You or staff, I was respectful. There was some that, I had to work with in education that I was a little bit more, jovial with, or a little bit easier to talk to, but I never, ever forgot who they were and what they thought I was. Now, staff that I worked with as bosses, like in the education building, And I think this is one of the times that I really remember being hurt, Marcy, was that I'm working with somebody that is treating me like a person, like a coworker. Like, that's why I love that job so much. And then every once in a while, she would treat me like an inmate. And it would hurt so badly. I'm like, no, Jennifer, don't ever cross that line in your mind, because of how painful that feels. To go from thinking, oh, we're close and I care for her and I love her and I think she loves me as a person. Oh, she just treated me like I'm an inmate. That's painful.
And in that same way that act is painful, I remember very specific times where a staff member out of nowhere would say something completely ordinary, like something you would hear in the free world, and speak to you like you were their neighbor or something, or you were running into them at the grocery store. And in those moments, I would have to fight back tears, almost like an emotional response, because it's so unheard of.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in the comments talking about their bosses, and I think that happens in there. It's a different relationship when you're working under a correctional officer, several hours every day, and especially when you're sitting in an environment like the library or the law library, conversations are going to happen. And it's not always, that doesn't mean it's necessarily in an inappropriate level, but it's just a more personal level than someone watching over you in the dorm or something. So, and then the same thing working in the chapel.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and Marcy, this is why they actually do have a policy that people that work as clerks and janitors, like those jobs typically that you're under somebody very closely, you're really supposed to be rotated every year. And what happened at Mountain View, there were three of us. Well, Alexa made it because she was in Braille, which is a whole separate thing. But there were three other of it that were in clerk jobs, Diane and Maria. And I'd been in the library for 8 years. Like, there's no way I should have been in there for 8 years. And so when an incident happened, this was their response, which didn't fix the incident that happened, but we got switched out. Because that was what they said, was that y'all get too close. You should not be working, because it's a security hazard too, right? Like, you're developing. I worked with this woman for 8 years, 5 days a week for 8 hours. That's a long time. And girl, yes, she did bring me Taylor Swift CDs to listen to. She did. But I mean, she just brought them in, and the staff was like, well, okay, set up the radio. And she was like, she found the ways that she could do things special for us that were really technically. And so what happens if you have people manipulating that? Well, then you have escape plans in inappropriate relationships. And, I understand the policies and rules in place about personal relationships, but it's taken so far that it trains them to treat us as furniture or subhuman, because they're so scared that something's going to happen with those personal relationships.
And I think just in that same kind of spirit, the rules against relationships, and I just mean humanity, relationships between incarcerated people, it's that same. Like, we can't hold the door open for people. I mean, if my friend's sister passed away, I can't give her a hug without breaking the rules, so they do kind of, just that environment trains the staff to kind of lose its humanity, and it trains the incarcerated people to kind of lose their humanity.
For sure. And it's like, that's what I mean. Like, that's what we've always talked about, like holding on to that shred of humanity inside of you underneath everything. And it's just hard to do when you're walking into a culture, right, like that is drastically different. And it's something that I did used to teach in peer education was, beliefs, attitudes, values, and norms that makes up a culture. And all of that is flipped on its head in prison. So what you define as loyalty and honesty, those values are different on the inside. They don't mean the same thing, right? So you may think you're operating from your values, but they're drastically different than prison values. So it's learning how to learn what those are while still holding to the values that make you a good citizen and a good human being, because the values on the inside are, constructed in a way to keep you safe in there. And I do want to point out, what are those norms? Like learning, and this is something you learn once you get there. What are those norms? Meaning, what are the behaviors that are acceptable in this culture, right? And you look at those things in different cultures, like, you know, giving somebody the middle finger here means something else in another country, right? Like giving the peace sign actually means, the middle finger somewhere. Like those are norms. And learning all those nuances inside, like if I put for us, we had shower stalls, Marcy, and when I put my towel on that shower stall, it means something. It means that's my shower, even though we're not supposed to save showers. So, bitch, if you get in my shower and you just saw my towel up there and you didn't ask everybody in the dorm whose towel is this, that's a huge violation of a norm, right? So there's a response that comes to that. And it's learning those things. Like I walk behind my girlfriend whenever we go somewhere, because that lets everybody know, don't don't. And it's also for me to protect her if I see anything, right? It's all those nuanced things that on the outside can be very jarring once you get into prison, because you're learning how to behave in a culture that is drastic. Things mean something drastically different.
Well, that's exactly right. You have to learn the rules. So that's probably really another piece of advice is first, just know you're not going to learn the rules from the state, from the officers. You're going to learn that from the other incarcerated ladies, and then the rules amongst the incarcerated folks. We have our own set of rules, and it varies from unit to unit, different things. And so you have to go in kind of knowing that you need to be mindful of that, right? And you can ask people. I don't know, I was in county jail and they're like, oh, don't ask for help, don't talk to but yeah, that's not the case. Those women, for the most part, are very helpful. So you can ask them, go with your own intuition. You're going to meet people that are like-minded, just like if you went into a new school or a new workplace. And trust your own intuition when it comes to that. Don't just automatically think everybody's out to get you.
Right. Yeah. And certainly another rule of thumb and good advice is to just sit and watch and listen, right? Just sit back and watch and listen, and you'll figure out how this culture works. And just learning how that, while when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? But like still holding on to your personal values, to not let the values of the prison culture truly become yours. You have to live there. You have to get along with folks. Yeah, and I'll use this example too, Marcy, because this is a huge one with us with relationships, and we've talked about this before, is the overinflated jealousy and possessiveness and just the all-consuming nature of relationships, romantic relationships on the inside. That's not normal out here, right? Like, I mean, I know that in toxic relationships that mirrors that, but for the most part, I'm like, honey, people in the world have a life. They don't have time to, hey, we're taking a shower together. We're sitting down to get, like, we're doing every single thing in the world together. And it's like, and I had a hard time that first time I got out, is because I'm like, oh, she disrespected me. I'm just going to break into her house and beat her up. It's like, no, ma'am. No, that's actually, I couldn't wrap my mind around that. Oh, she deserves her privacy and her space. And when she tells me no, that's a boundary. And because prison culture had taught me that that was disrespect. You don't want to talk to me, you're being disrespectful. And it's relearning, you know, the values of our outside culture is really a hard transition.
Yeah, it's the same way. You have to learn the culture going in, and then you have to relearn or unlearn that culture going out. So that's
Right.
exactly right. Tunchi, we're at the top of the hour. I want to answer the few questions because
Yeah,
because I said I would for sure.
for
So
sure.
first, R.I.P. Gangsta Boo
I love it. I love it so
says,
much.
how much time did y'all do? So I did a little over 10 years. Tune.
I did almost 20.
So we have 30 years in between the two of us. Um, I'm scrolling through the chat there. Y'all, thanks for chatting. Thanks for your comments on here. Honestly, y'all are awesome. We had a huge turnout in the comment section today, and we appreciate you. So in that spirit, while I'm thumbing through that, can I ask you guys to please like the video if you're watching us live right now, comment when we're finished with the video, will you please share it? We would appreciate y'all so much. And then there was somebody on here that said they didn't get their notification. And so you were watching from Facebook. But if you watch us on YouTube, you guys can turn that little notification on, and it's not going to let you. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple podcast, wherever you're listening, you can subscribe to us there so you don't miss a show. Teresa's asking about tell us about the hobby unit. So could you do a quick rundown of what we know? And I'll just say I never lived on the hobby unit. My girlfriend did spend time on the hobby unit.
Yeah, and I've only visited there once, and it was absolutely horrendous. But many of my friends are there right now, and I go visit them there. And please, Mandy or whoever is in the comments, you can chime in. It's considered right up there with Lane Murray is and Plain State is the three top worst units to be at, and especially in terms of conditions of confinement. They often have problem with their plumbing. They're chronically short of staffed in ways that other units aren't. It's mainly cell block. It's just, I think the culture there has gotten a little different. The women have told me that the warden there has, you know, it's top down, right? The leadership influences the correction officers, and there's like you said earlier, the units are different in terms of culture. So it's gotten a little bit better, but it's hot. They're in their cell blocks, and you know, recently. I would love for y'all to check out the article. We've posted it in several places on our platforms. Is that some ladies reached out to the Austin NPR station and gave their account. You can hear them in their own voices talking about their experiences with the heat. So again, super excited and just quite frankly amazed at the level of stepping up and advocating for themselves in ways that we've never seen before. So yeah, that's a little bit about, there's so much.
Yeah, it's a movement happening right now. We're seeing it with previously incarcerated folks on the outside, and we're seeing the ladies on the inside stepping up and speaking for themselves. And so that is something to get excited about. Tunch, what are we talking about next week? We have to wrap this sucker up.
What are we talking about next
I
week?
think we should talk about relationships again, but
yeah.
specifically incarcerated relationships, both parties incarcerated.
Yeah.
Because I think last time we kind of talked about pen pal relationships and we kind of stretched it out, but I think we can narrow it in on the ins and outs of.
You should ask a friend of yours that is always very curious about relationships if she would like to join us. I remember her saying that she found that very interesting.
Okay, that
Maybe,
sounds like a
if you
plan.
want.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. So with that said, that's what we'll go with. And you guys, if you have ideas for us, put it in the chat here, put it on any of our social medias, say, hey, I think you guys should talk about this, or hey, we would really like to know about this. And we're down for it. We appreciate you guys so much for joining us.
Marci, before we
Say
close,
it.
sure, you know, tell them about the board meeting Friday.
Oh, how did I miss that? Yeah, I need to do another little video clip that says upcoming events.
Right.
We are headed to Galveston tomorrow. The Tunch and I are going to raise some hell. No, we can't say that, right? At the board meeting, at the TDCJ board meeting in Galveston. It is at the the Louis,
San
what
Luis
is it? San Luis
Resort
and
Spa
Spa.
Center. Yes.
It's right there on the seawall, and it starts at 8:30, but I think the part that we really are concerned about starts at 10:30, and we're doing it. Teresa says she's going to be there. Carrie says she's going to be there. Man, we're so excited. But it's open for public comment. We encourage you, if you are anywhere in that area or have the ability to travel, get there with us, guys. And we would be so happy to meet you. We would be so happy to help you that morning. You have to fill out a registration card. But basically, if you go to Linus's social media, you can see, and it's on my Facebook as well, y'all. We did a live today, kind of giving the breakdown and telling you what you need to know about the meeting. What did I leave out?
Yeah, no, that's it. No, that was perfect. And yeah, I think Miss Jerry did over 30 years at Mountain View. She's in the area, and I hope to connect with her. She was on here earlier, providing her experience. So yeah, y'all, we'll see you in Galveston Friday.
We will be there, and we are ready to submit our public comment and tell TDCJ exactly what's what.
Right.
Thank y'all for hanging out with us on the Rec-Yard Women's Prison Podcast with Marci Marie and Tunchi. Make sure and subscribe to our channels so you'll never miss a rec night.